Shalom Erev Tov. Adonai Oz la'amo yaten Adonai yavarek et amo via shalom. Vashalom. The Lord gives strength to his people and blesses them with peace. Psalms 29:11. And now we're going to hand it off to SFT because he has some important announcements to make. And this time, yes, we can hear him. So here we go.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Praise. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Matt. Guys, we're just going to go over a few quick points that we touched on. We're looking at the bigger picture here in regards to emotionally stunted emoticons, so-called quote-unquote irrefutable presentation regarding pond scum to people evolution, evidence he believes we can't address. Well, we addressed a ton of it in part one of this video. Please watch that video. As far as I'm concerned, it's irrefutable, and I don't expect there to be a rebuttal in the future from ESE or any evolutionist for that matter. The bigger picture, we touched on a few things, touched on genetic boundaries in regards to the new research and data that has demonstrated sufficiently for the evolutionists who constantly want absolute evidence for limited ancestry. That's what it comes down to: limited ancestry versus universal common ancestry. Are whales and pine trees related? Here's the big question. That's what they believe. And this new data does suggest that 90% of all life has the same level of genetic diversity. That means almost all life on Earth is the exact same age. And this is all from the empirical method. Empirical scientific evidence suggests this. We talked about speciation rates, the testable predictions that are coming from the creation side. Genes, traits, those are what's inherited. That's what we need to look at. That is what's going to answer the question of the origin of species. What is the origin of species? And we talked about recent observations that have been documented on paper regarding the formation of new species, and the formation of these new species occur at rates much faster than predicted by evolutionists. We watched that video of Dr. Nathaniel Jensen about the similarity percentage between chimps and humans, and how evolutionists are constantly failing over and over again in regards to predictions. They can't make novel testable predictions in regards to genetics or speciation rates, or else they'd make it, because what we're seeing in regards to the new species, for example, the new species of finch, is exactly in line with predictions that have been published by Dr. Nathaniel Jensen in Replacing Darwin. So I recommend looking up those. And not only that, the manner in which these new species have been formed, once again, is exactly to a T in line with predictions that have been published by Dr. Nathaniel Jensen. So all of these results that we went over is demonstrating that creation science is the real science. And that's the gold standard of science. Which explanations make the most future and novel testable predictions? And it's coming from our end. So when you look at the bigger picture, we see genetic boundaries, and we even went over and touched base regarding some of their rescue devices. And it's all based on an assumption, because that's their first and primary assumption. For example, emotionally stunted emoticon, he assumes that common ancestry is true. And that assumption, that basic assumption, nearly always goes unquestioned, even when the data doesn't support it. And we've provided more than enough data that is not consistent and does not support his belief that whales and pine trees are related. It's just not science. He can believe in it, because I would recommend watching the debates we've had with him, because all he has are beliefs and stories. Fairy tales is all it really is. I want to pass it off to Matt to go over a couple things as well in regards to the overview. Then we're just going to do a quick, probably 10-minute, 15-minute review of Ken Hovind's debate recently with the animal specialist, Mark. And then we're going to finish off ESE's video here. And that's why this is called The Final Destruction of the Emotionally Stunted Emoticon. So he can peacefully retire after this is done. Go ahead, Matt.
All right. Okay. Well, we covered a lot yesterday. One, because I speak as fast as I possibly can sometimes. And two, because we're trying to answer everything that was in the video. So that way he's not like, well, he ignored half of it. So we are critiquing literally everything that we possibly can. I take notes. I watched it first so I could get everything that I could beforehand. And we talked about speciation rates. We talked about the Y chromosome fusion that fails tests because of the satellite DNA that you mentioned again yesterday. We talked about similarities between ape and man, how there's far more dissimilarities than there are similarities. You know, like I always tell people, you know, you think you're related to one, go get a blood transfusion. We'll see how that goes. So after that person in your family dies, maybe you'll start to reconsider. We also talked about different branches of phylogenetic trees that they build and why they build them the way that they do and why they ignore some testing methods like cytochrome B rather than cytochrome C charts because they don't get the answers that they want, so it gets removed because it falsifies themselves. So today we're going to be going on the video and covering a little bit more. And none of it will retouch on what we did yesterday. So there should be like no repeating of anything going on. So that'll be good for everybody. I can't really think too much of we went over yesterday, except for those major ones. Mostly yesterday was speciation rates and why it matters, and the Y chromosome, because that, I mean, really, without Y chromosome fusion, there was no chimp ancestor split. And since that did not happen, then that falsifies the rest of it. And, you know, any piece of evidence falsifies the rest of any other theory. So when you prove that one thing can't happen and it falsifies it, that you only need one piece of evidence. You can actually have 99 pieces of evidence against you and in a room for a murder. But when they find that one fingerprint on that one weapon, guess what? That's all the evidence they need. And that's the smoking gun. So I guess if you want to touch on the debate today, let's do it.
Yeah, I'd like for you guys to touch up on that because I mean I had my own thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, awesome. I thought, just to get into that real quick, and then we'll finish off ESE's intro there. Yeah, so I enjoyed the debate. I like the discussion format. I think that debate is proof that it's not always the more you say or who says the most that wins the debate, because technically it was creation versus evolutionism. They were on trial. We're assessing the data, the evidence they have. And I felt like although Mark talked a lot as an animal specialist, he didn't say much of anything. For example, in regards to dogs, domestic dogs that have been artificially bred from, say, two wolves or a family of wolves, he talked a lot about adaptation, taking traits, emphasizing them, which in turn leads to dogs that have better senses in regard to smell and just various other traits in the dog breeds that we have. And, simple adaptation, artificial selection, this type of change in the genome, it's not leading to any type of meaningful, novel, and of course, forward evolution. So his position was to actually demonstrate or give credibility to universal common ancestry, right? The idea that bacteria, whales, pine trees, humans, and apes are all related to common ancestry, and going through changes and variation in dogs. No anatomical change, of course, but just basic change that we don't disagree with, in no way provided sufficient evidence for his position of universal common ancestry. So I think it was brilliant with Ken Hovind's line of questioning, because it puts Mark and his opponent in the defense position. So, for example, when they were talking about the dog variations, Hovind would ask, well, are there any limits, right? Can you get a dog as big as a dog that weighs 3 tons. And then all of a sudden Mark goes into a lengthy explanation and how it depends on the environment because of the bone structure and physical reasons, for example. But the thing is, as Holvin pointed out, there are animals that actually exist that are as big as elephants, for example, right? There's mammals that are as small as a pygmy mouse. And I felt the evolutionist was kind of stumbling over himself and in a way indirectly admitting that, yes, there are limits. And that actually puts a barrier to the change that he necessarily needs to not have a barrier. So I think the line of questioning Holvin used kind of exposed that. So I think if you look at it objectively, even as an evolutionist, I see no way and no how that you could, be convinced that pond scum to people evolution is true. Because he even admitted that, dogs today would have had to come from something non-dog long ago and far away, whether it's a single-celled organism. He says he believes that and didn't really give any solid evidence for it. And Holvin, I think, accurately pointed out that the study of biology, I mean, it's fun looking at the variation. But that's all we see is variation that clearly has limits. And that's evidence for creation. So, I mean, those are my thoughts. I thought it was a good debate. I enjoyed it. I think the question and answer period was good too. What are your thoughts, Matt?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I mean, I didn't catch a lot of the debate. I caught more of the end. And what I was witnessing was more along the lines of what was going on. It was crazy. It was it really wasn't touching on what I thought it would be for an animal specialist. I thought the guy was going to come in with something a little bit more than variations of coat color. You know what I mean?
Right. Speed and coat color and no anatomical, novelty. Just things that and that's why Holvin could just sit back after he asked his question and pretty well allow Mark to just talk and talk because he wasn't saying anything meaningful. He wasn't actually giving evidence that's credible for his position. Nobody disagrees with the dog variations we see.
Right. Exactly. No one's ever. Yeah. Exactly. See, they need so many examples of like dogs losing its fur and gaining flesh so that they have subcutaneous layers of fat under their skin, and their fat converts into blubber so that they can live in cold water. You know what I mean? And they don't have these steps. They don't have what's required. They just say, well, look, the beak size on the finch is different. Look at this. The cat fur is different when it lives in the Arctic, and the polar bear's white when it lives in the Arctic. These slight little changes are not going to take something from that bear going into something or into a whale. That's just never going to happen. Every gene would have to change the function that it does, and that is a lot of information addition. So
exactly. And you know what? We understand the law of monophyly, and they can say all day, every day that we would expect dogs to produce dogs. If we didn't see dogs producing dogs, that would falsify evolution. But at the end of the day, saying that you believe, and not only do they believe, but they actually promote it as science, that an amoeba-like organism, a single-celled organism, slowly evolved through incremental changes over time, lots of time, that's their God, of course, into whales and dogs and pine trees. That needs to be demonstrated. That the burden of proof is on them. And spending 10 minutes every time Holvin asks a question describing the variation we see in dogs, in breeds, and then pointing to wolves as the supposed non-dog that dogs today came from. A wolf is a dog. A bacteria-like organism is not a dog. There's been some major novel changes, and they need to provide evidence for that. So I think overall, Holvin really only had to ask these simple questions regarding limits, and indirectly he had to admit to limits. He pretty well had to admit dogs are not going to get as big as an elephant unless there's some significant environmental change that leads to that type of adaptation. and elephants are that size because that's the environment that they've evolved into and have adapted into in their current circumstances. But he's really just proving the creation side, because there are different kinds of creatures, and they all adapt accordingly in regards to very strict limits. And the variations are fun to look at. They're fun to study, but there's clearly a barrier to the change. I mean, dogs are never going to grow wings and fly. And yet there are animals that exist that can fly. They're called birds. They exist. This is a different type of organism than a dog, and these evolutionists want to play these cladistic and taxonomic games, word games. That's all it is. Anything beyond dogs producing a variety of dogs is in the realm of imagination. It's a fact. They don't want to admit it, but it really is a fact.
Great point. I also like the point where he was bringing up about star evolution. I didn't see any rebuttal from that guy that Ken Homan was debating. Only thing we see is the degradation of stars, and they go extinct when they go out into back whatever the hell it goes back into, like, I guess, molecules.
Right.
So
everything is subject to entropy and degradation, even stars. You're right, Praise.
Yeah, I mean, that's just part of the law of entropy. And yes, it's in the cell too. It's like, I mean, why is that trivial for evolutionists to understand? Like, if the universe
they hear the word entropy and they automatically think, the entropy that we see in the universe. Yeah, you know what? The universe is decaying. The universe is winding down. And on a biological level, our genes are decaying. It's not that hard to understand, guys.
Right. And we see it in our world today. Things degrade. It's not going to change on some magical molecule that was in some pond, and all of a sudden, like, we get from, I like to say this, from, was it whales? Fish or fishermen or whatever,
Right.
There's all sorts of different ways you can do it. But it's ridiculous. It's fantasy. It's fairy tale. It's fairy tale land. In fact, we're probably more empirical and reasonable than evolutionists will ever be.
Oh, absolutely. That's why we're making the future testable predictions. And that's why these evolutionists don't want to actually discuss the novel predictions we're making. Mutation rate, related predictions on the 3 major haplogroups. These DNA differences are a marker of time, okay? And if that marker of time is a reflection of 6,000 years roughly, well, that novel prediction flows from that mitochondrial DNA map, because now we should be able to read through genetic markers the history of civilization from our mitochondrial DNA. And that's what Dr. Nathaniel Jensen is doing. And he's got some really astounding data and confirmed predictions that are currently going through the peer review process. So once that comes out, what are the evolutionists going to say next? There's even more confirmed novel predictions. But if these DNA differences are a marker of hundreds of thousands to millions of years, you're not going to be able to read the history of civilization off of that mitochondrial DNA map, because it should just be a jumbled mess. And guess what? We can already see that we can read. There are genetic markers that point us to the Roman Empire, the transatlantic slave trade, the Persian Empire. This is because these DNA differences are a marker of biblical time frame, not evolutionary time frame. But guess what? The evolutionists don't want to discuss that because they're not actually making the novel prediction. That's why Dr. Herman Mays avoided discussing that with Dr. Jensen, because they always ask, where's the novel predictions? Well, guess what? We could talk all day long about novel predictions.
Yep. So you guys want to go with the presentation now, or what do you guys have in mind?
Yeah, let's do it. I think that's all I have to say regarding the debate. Unless you guys have some final points you want to say, we can go right to ESE.
Yeah, I thought Kent did an excellent job, though. He always comes prepared with his points. He's always sharp. He always has a presentation. I mean, he's always giving logical arguments, reasonable scientific arguments. So I really respect Kent for that. So he's one of the top creationist debaters out there that I've seen.
He got into stellar evolution at home. I like that one. That's fun.
Yep. So it's fun watching Kent. So here we go. Now we're going to go to the video. Here it is.
Is false. Show me where it phylogeny breaks down. So, knowing that this kind of evolution is possible and speciation is possible, are lala palms related to all the other palm trees within this genus? All the palm trees within the genus related to all the other palm trees within this tribe? All the palm trees within the tribe related to all the other palm trees within this subfamily? Are all 2,500 plus species of palm trees related? How can we tell? What about trilobites? Are all 20,000 species of trilobites related? How can we tell? What about orchids? Are all 28,000 species of orchids related? How can we tell? What about crustaceans?
Yeah, right around there.
Are all 50
Back up maybe a little bit right before that. Or, yeah, it was right at that trilobites thing.
kind of evolution is possible and speciation is possible?
Hold
Are
on.
lala palms related to all the other palm trees within this genus? All the palm trees within the genus related to all the other palm trees within this tribe? All the palm trees within the tribe related to all the other palm trees within this subfamily? Are all 2,500 plus species of palm trees related? How can we tell? What about trilobites?
There we go. And you're on share screen.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have anything to really show right now.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
I have some more for later. I'm trying to bring up things for people to see later.
So here's the trilobite part right here.
Are all 20,000 species of trilobites related? How can we tell? What about orchids? Are
Okay,
all
perfect. Yeah, let's play
28,000
that. We'll hear what he says about it, and then we'll go.
species of orchids related? How can we tell? What about crustaceans? Are all 50,000 species of crustaceans related? Again, how can we distinguish what is related from what is not, or how to identify common design from common descent? So enough of going over the shortcomings of creationist arguments, and let's get down to the facts of common descent. It is a fact that evolution happens. It is a fact that biodiversity and complexity do increase, and that there are multiple molecular and anatomical techniques that can be used to trace this biodiversity over many generations. It is a fact that humans are a subset of apes in the same way we're a subset of primates, and in the same way we're a subset of mammals. And this is evidenced by remarkable morphological
going
similarities
on?
between
I don't
humans
hear
and great apes,
Oh, you don't hear anything? Here you go.
or nearly identical genetic similarity and synteny. The fossil record has consistent temporal and geographic distribution, the number of chromosomes shared between humans and great apes, to the conservation of endogenous retroviral sequences, to the discovery of vestigial genes. It is a fact that both micro and macroevolution events have been observed. It is a fact that macroevolution have been indirectly demonstrated by the in vitro fertilization of different animal species and the grafting of different plant species. It is a fact that transitional forms do exist. It is a fact that atavisms and vestiges only appear in lineages whose basal ancestor possess the character in question, and that their distribution within the species fits the nested hierarchy of life with remarkable consistency. It is a fact that every living species on Earth has relative species either extant or extinct. It is a fact that every organism since Darwin fits within the tree of life. And finally, it is a fact that the distribution of diagnostic traits shared between any two or more groups of fundamentally similar organisms is best explained by common descent as opposed to common design.
Yeah, 1 minute.
All right. The trilobite section where we started off didn't have any sound. It was just picture after picture after you hit play. I think he was muted.
Oh, okay. Hold on.
It's not.
And the grafting of different plant species. It is a fact that transitional forms do exist. It is a fact that atavisms and vestiges only appear in linear.
Yeah, a little bit more.
It is a fact to the facts.
Oh, there it is.
So enough of going over the shortcomings of creationist arguments. How can we tell? What about trilobites? Are all 20,000 species of trilobites related? How can we tell? What about orchids? Are all 28,000 species of orchids related? How can we tell? What about crustaceans? Are all 50,000 species of crustaceans related? Again, how can we distinguish what is related from what is not, or how to identify common design from common descent?
All right, good.
So enough of going over the short.
He threw in a couple questions there. There were a bunch. So we'll start with the trilobites. Why not? We know about trilobites through the fossil record because they were wiped out from the flood. So they didn't move on. So he said, are all 20,000 species of trilobites related? We'd say yes, they were. He said, and how many species could have how could this have happened with a young Earth creationism model, right? So we have to know the speciation rate of something to know that. Since they are not testable, what we did is, for me to answer this question, is actually look at the fossils. So take, for example, well, rather than me just break it down, I'm going to answer it this way. I say yes. And to tell, we can look at European flounders in the Baltic Sea. This is a good example because they have diverged into two different lineages and hundreds upon hundreds of subspecies and hybrid species, all within less than 2,400 generations. But how can this happen? You see, we have 8 species of bear today. And if you see bears on every continent, but their reproduction age is only around 3 to 5 years, and a female bear only gives birth to about 1 to 4 cubs maximum. So how much diversity of species do we find with bear, right? Well, only 8, because they don't create very many young, and they live in ecosystems that are very simplistic. But the ocean is very diverse, and the temperatures fluctuate and the depth fluctuates. So we are going to expect a lot more out of aquatic life. So trilobites are very different than bears, meaning that they lay eggs. And when they do, they lay hundreds of young at one time. We've seen this in the fossil record when they found eggs that are present inside of one that was discovered in 1994. And if anything, they're like a horseshoe crab, which scientists presume that it's a subspecies that survived, then we have to assume then that they lay 16 to 17 different molting seasons. M-O-L-T-S, molts. It's kind of like a mating season, but they have 16 or 17 different births where they live in their short life, where they birth hundreds and hundreds of eggs. So which means that they literally have hundreds of thousands of young during their lifetime. Considering these flounders were mentioned and they reproduce only once around 2 to 3 years of age, but yet have huge diversity in their short amount of time, then the odds of trilobites having more diversity should be expected and obvious. So that's my answer to that one. So are all 50,000 subspecies of crustaceans related, like crabs and lobsters and shrimps? No, they're not. They've never been able to interbreed them. They don't have same blood. There's a lot of differences with crustaceans. So that's why they are not the same as where things that obviously have different shell shapes, we assume that the trilobite species are related just because their diversity still makes them look like trilobites. That's all we can do with fossils. We don't have any genetic data material from them. So I hope that was a good answer. And all of the links to these are in the 100 falsifications, but I'll supply them, I guess, in the comment section and chat after this. So go ahead. Sorry, if you want to answer too, please go ahead.
Yeah, well, what you said was perfect. Obviously, it was awesome. It also appears like ESE assumes that we know exactly how many original kinds of anything really God actually created, right? It was 2 of every kind and 7 of some, of course, that went onto the ark. But how many dog kinds did God create? How many crustacean kinds did God create? You know, he created population. And just like you said, there's only so much you can learn from fossils. Fossils are good, but a lot of it, well, for one, for the evolutionists, when they look at a fossil, immediately, whether they realize it or not, they're assuming universal common ancestry. So they're going to force fit all the data into where, they believe it fits according to their primary assumption. Now, that's why, we always say it's traits that are inherited. It's genetics where we're going to discover the true origin of species. And that's why we have made predictions, and I'm not going to be redundant here and tell you exactly what they are since I've done it 1,000 times. But in regards to biblical kinds, what's related, what's not, we've made predictions on relative DNA patterns between kinds. We've made predictions about rates of mutation within kinds, accurate retrodictions have been true. Accurate predictions in regards to the speciation rates have come true, as we both touched on. And it also makes predictions on DNA function between kinds. These are just a few of the ways that we can identify what's related and what's not. Some of these predictions have come true. Many retrodictions are consistent with a biblical-based model. And we'll just have to find out. We only understand less than 5% of the DNA language. So in due time, since we've made predictions, we'll see just how accurate they turn out to be, for example. Another thing too is he brought up, I guess there's a few things he brought up there. Chromosome 2 fusion, we already debunked that quite extensively in the last video. So he kind of just threw that in there. So I guess I would just suggest go back and watch that part. We discussed, because of satellite DNA, why it's a special case, this hypothetical chromosome 2 fusion. So, we went in depth there. He talked about like morphological and anatomical similarities between apes, the great apes, and humans as well. We touched on that briefly last time, showing that apes and humans are not related. But even just these relative hierarchies in regards to similarities, for example, we've gone over many times that the creation/design model predicts the fact of nested hierarchies as much as evolution does. And then evolution, everything doesn't fit in a neat nested hierarchy anyways. That's why they have to invoke rescue devices like convergent evolution. They're constantly changing the classification of things, because there's so much interpretation and assumption and storytelling built into that. So obviously on a genomic level as well, we predict the same type of nested hierarchical patterns. But the entire story of human evolution has been destroyed. So those hierarchies that we see, the similarities, we obviously conclude that that's the result of design. As Ken Hovind says, the lug nuts off a Chevy Cruze are probably interchangeable with a Toyota Corolla. That doesn't prove that they evolved from a skateboard billions of years ago. Okay, well, we're making testable predictions. So that, those similarities, those traits, sure, they could fit universal common ancestry, or they can fit a design model. But that's why we've made numerous genomic-related predictions, which I just touched on a few. Also, in regards to human evolution, what do we know now? Well, all their claimed examples of pre-humans been destroyed. So, for example, the Homo neanderthalensis, now we know, and I've got a paper here too. I'll provide it for ESE. I know he likes the sources, but they had a very high genetic load that suggested they were 40% less fit than modern humans. And that's exactly what we've always predicted, that these pre-humans, so-called pre-humans, are just humans, but they're genetically compromised humans. The early human population that they refer to as hobbits, I've got a paper here as well from researchgate.net. They were also inbred. They suffered from reductive evolution. It's just a special type of genetic degeneration that resulted in their dwarfing, results in reduced body size, reduced brain volume, and various other pathologies. And remember, natural selection oftentimes favors smaller brain sizes because the brain takes up so much energy. So in specific isolated situations, if natural selection favors smaller brain sizes just to, preserve some energy, and then these evolutionists like Bill Ludlow, they've got all these different brain sizes from smallest to biggest, thinking that proves evolution. No, it proves creation and genetic entropy, post-fall and post-Babel, inbred isolated populations. Those two have been destroyed. Homo erectus, another paper here, not lots of information suggesting that they also suffered from reductive evolution. They were highly inbred. That resulted in their more abnormal features. So, for example, their body size, brain size, other suggested and observed pathologies. Actually, the fact is the hobbits and Naledi, for example, they probably can be safely put into the more diverse erectus category, variations of erectus. These are all humans so far. There's no transitionals. There's no overlapping. Homo Naledi, like I just mentioned, once again, they'll say is a transitional form or overlaps with humans. They had reduced body size, reduced brain volume, and other pathologies. And endocasts were even done, I believe it was on the Naledi as well, suggesting that their brain was more similar to humans, fully human. All of these so-called pre-humans, human. Then you got your Australopithecines, Australopithecus afarensis, Lucy, for example. These are just extinct apes. There's evidence that humans lived alongside the Australopithecines until they obviously went extinct. You got two kinds, the human kind, the ape kind. You got the Australopithecines that are obviously extinct now. Anatomically modern footprints were found, alongside Australopithecines. So the entire evolution story is dead. It's a whole bush. You can read so many contradicting quotes from, these scientists that study this in this field. It's a total mess. Bill Ludlow, for example, the evolutionists looked at him as the expert in human evolution. And just in the 5 minutes I was talking, I literally went through pretty much every single so-called pre-human that he points to and destroyed it. And it's all consistent with a biblical creation model. So I noticed he talked about that, the chromosome 2 fusion, what's related, what's not. We just touched on that. What else did we see there in that few minutes of his presentation?
Well, to touch on something else you said, we actually have modern day examples of exactly what you're talking about with polar bears. Because of interbreeding and them being landlocked, we see massive genetic degradation taking place in them. The average bear today, polar bear, has the minimum of 15 genetic diseases. They're crumbling inside because of it. So,
yeah, you can see all these variations, all these different abnormal features you see in these different so-called pre-humans. You can actually see them in subgroups of isolated peoples today, and I got a ton of information here and sources and everything. It's unbelievable just how thoroughly refuted human evolution is currently. We can talk all day about it, but I know we're going to do separate videos on that later. So he brought that up briefly. We demolished it briefly.
I just like that somebody that can literally look at all the experiments of flies and worms and bacteria and all the short generational time species, or whatever you want to call them, any test that they've ever done, they are unable to get any new anatomical feature, even out of simple bacteria. And they need massive amounts of new information coming into the genome to make linear evolution to be true. They can't even give you one bacteria producing anything. They go, well, they digested nylon. Yeah, good job.
Yeah, they need to learn a thing or two about epigenetics and the types of adaptation that we're seeing. The capability of these organisms to adapt we're just in the infancy of even understanding it. And just like our design model, based on the way that, well, for one, the Bible says that we're created uniquely in the image of God. We just demonstrated that humans are not related to any type of ape, since we just literally categorized every single so-called pre-human into the human family, and then we have separate family with the Australopithecines and apes. There's your two separate created kinds. What more do they want in regards to the so-called phylogeny challenge? And the most important kind, biblical kind, to actually separate from anything else is humankind, right? And we've done that thoroughly. So, there you go there. The hierarchies we see, they're exactly predicted and expected based on the design model. God created us in the image of God. Let's look at the way we design things, since we're created in the image of God, okay? And then maybe we can get an idea into how God created life. And we see that humans design things, for example, modes of transportation, in hierarchical patterns. All sedans share very similar features, and they're all going to be way more similar to each other than a sedan is to, say, a hatchback or to a truck. But at the end of the day, the hatchback or the SUV is going to have more in common with the truck than the sedan does to the It's this natural hierarchy. And that's why when we look to DNA and genetics, this is what's going to distinguish between the models. And what do we see? Genomics is proving biblical creation. But we can see so many vehicles now with all these design safety features that they have, and how vehicles now, they actually adapt to various situations. You have things like proximity braking. You have things like lane assist, where if you're driving, your car could actually sense if you're veering off a little bit, it'll actually put you right back into the center of the lane. I mean, these are built-in adaptive mechanisms. Therefore, we can predict as creationists, the way we build modes of transportation with adaptive mechanisms, we're going to predict that God did the same thing with organisms. And guess what? What are we seeing? Epigenetic changes. Animals adapt. There's never any new, novel, meaningful information being added to the genome. It's all adaptation, exactly as what we would predict and expect.
Well said, man. I mean, that's exactly. These people don't realize what's required for evolution to be true. We can look at numbers and play that game all the time, but think about it logically. A bacteria, for example, because this is what they study the most to prove evolution to be true, they would need to obtain how many genes to turn into a human? Well, a bacteria has what, like 1,500, 1,700 genes? Humans have 19,000. So then they also need to invent homobox genes or HOX genes, right? They have to invent these genes. Like all insects and humans, for example, contain like 8 homobox genes. These are clusters of 2 complex genes, both of which are located on chromosome 3. But in reality, think about it. All mutations in humans, animals, and insects of the HOX genes cause genetic disorders. So now all of a sudden a bacteria has to evolve this new gene. Then it has to make it highly constrained to protect itself, because if the gene is mutated, it causes severe deformalities. And then it has to invent its way to produce new functions and new anatomical features. And then it can never mutate, because when it does get a mutation, it messes things up. It's just, they're in a complete disaster if they just look at like what needs to happen. I mean, it's insane, all the things that can go wrong. But to them,
way more things can go wrong in the genome due to mutation and changes than can actually go right. And how many things do they need to go right to take their fish to fishermen, or their pond scum to people, or their bacteria-to-biologists? A lot has to go right.
Right.
They can show examples of changes in allele frequencies all day, and examples of adaptation. But you know what? To say that those are examples or lines of evidence that's going to take their bacteria-like organism into a whale is nothing but imagination and fairy tale. It's not actually science.
Oh, I know. Exactly. There's so many things that go wrong. That's why their rescuing devices they have are like 2 or 3 things. They always go the little tiny things to help back up, like they can defeat Lowe's limit, or
And you know what? Even when they ask, like, what would you accept as a transitional form, for example, and see these things too. I mean, so much of taxonomy and cladistics and just classifying animals through anatomy and morphology and shared derived characteristics. It's just so arbitrary, because even what they might point to as a transitional, we're not even against. Even if there is an animal that shares traits from 2 different types of creatures, it's still predicted under a design model, as I've been talking about, because we even see that humans design vehicles that span 2 categories. We can even compare that to something like Tiktaalik or mosaics. Mosaics is the best way to put it. And we see mosaics, and we see that humans design these types of modes of transportation, right? Like look at boats and tanks, for example. That's 2 totally different kinds of vehicles. We would classify those into entirely different classes. And there actually exist vehicles that blend the features of these 2 very different means of transportation. So if an evolutionist is asking you, what would you accept as a transitional form? It's not, I don't believe that's a correct answer to say, well, we're looking for, a creature that blends the features of 2 very different kinds of animals, because at the end of the day, we would predict seeing something like that, right? Look at an amphibious assault vehicle, for example. That is almost impossible to classify. You know, where do you fit something like that? That's the perfect example of their so-called transitional form, right? That specific vehicle is designed by humans for the transitional environments between water and land. You know, because I noticed he had some I'm not sure if he specifically had like Tiktaalik or some whale so-called ancestors, but so much of it is inference-based, assumption-based storytelling. That's why at the end of the day, it comes down to genetics. And that's why we've made so many novel predictions. Traits are inherited, genes are inherited. This is how we're going to figure out what's related and what's not. And even if you want to look in detail at their so-called transitionals, right? Tiktaalik, whales, the entire whale series, whether you're looking at Rhodocetus or Ambulocetus or Pakicetus, it's all highly questionable. It's all speculation. It's all wishful thinking. You know, we can go Tiktaalik, for example, looks to be nothing more than just a bottom-dwelling lobe-finned fish. But like I said, it's so arbitrary because we do predict certain animal. Why wouldn't God create specific animals that blend the features of, just like we look at an amphibious assault vehicle? So it comes down to genetics, and I don't see much coming from ESE in regards to novel predictions. We've explained over and over again how we're going to confirm and identify what's related and what's not. We've already got a ton of evidence. And in the future, the more we sequence the genome and understand the DNA language, we're going to have more answers. I'm excited for it. But these evolutionists need to step up and make some predictions themselves.
Exactly. It's just amazing how many genetic disorders we can see when we look at mutations, but yet they see that, oh no, disorders, they just presume benefits occurred all the time in the past, constantly, all the time. It's just so contrary to the evidence that we have.
Literally, these critics, they ignore mutation accumulation, the destructive effects of mutations. Genetic entropy is a reality. And denying this is honestly an embarrassment. Like, these population geneticists do agree that man is presently degenerating. They know these mutations are building up. The more we sequence and understand the genome, we see just how functional it really is, which makes almost no mutation truly neutral. That's why we always say nearly neutral. They're deleterious, very small fitness effects. And to deny this, like, even these, it's kind of a trade secret, right? You know, Dr. John Sanford was an evolutionist for years, one of the top population geneticists, said it over and over again. He's spoken at NIH. He's respected. The reason these population geneticists are coming up with mechanisms like synergistic epistasis, mutation count mechanism, those two come to mind. I mean, they've been thoroughly falsified because they know that they have to have an answer to this. And Dr. John Sanford will tell you that it's a trade secret. These evolutionary population geneticists, they know there's an issue. That's why there's been no real peer-reviewed rebuttal. Because Dr. John Sanford, he asks his population geneticist friends. He talks about it, and I believe him. I don't care if the evolutionist thinks that he's lying, but it's truth. And he says, why hasn't there been any serious response to his work? Not some blog or not some Amazon review or a video by Jackson Wheat, like serious responses by real population geneticists. And his population geneticist friends admit, well, that's because they don't have an answer. They'll admit they don't have an answer, but they just believe, well, there's got to be an answer out there. They won't admit the obvious, that evolution's not true. So, you know, these evolutionists like ESE, they can deny it all day long. But the fact is, deleterious mutations are building up. You talked about mutations, Matt. Most of them are unselectable. They're in the unselectable zone in regards to mutations, and they have no way to solve it. You know, it's a fact. We're degenerating, and you're not going to take your fish to fishermen through degeneration. That's just a fact, and common sense too.
Or snail to whale.
Right. Snail to whale. Yeah, no, it's amazing that how much these guys deny the science. How much more of the video do you have? Do you want to play the rest and then?
Yeah.
Goes over ERVs and macroevolution on Darwin's finches and a couple other things. So
let's do it.
Comings of creationist arguments, and let's get down to the facts of common descent. It is a fact that evolution happens. It is a fact that biodiversity and complexity do increase, and that there are multiple molecular and anatomical techniques that can be used to trace this.
Yeah, like one quick thing though. When people make these dogmatic claims, it's a fact that something happens. See, science doesn't deal with epistemology. So to me, that's a philosophical claim. Sorry, Amy, you're going to have to start justifying this metaphysically or some type of epistemology to justify your claims. I mean, I just like to point that out because they always say evolution is a fact. It's proven. No, right. Science doesn't deal with proofs. It just deals with data, and that's it.
That's a great point, Praise. That's a great. They just say it, like Hovind was saying in his debate today with Mark. They just say like evolve. You know, this is how this. You know, they can say these things evolved all they want, or they can say that, you know, mosquitoes and whales are related. Like, you can say these things all day long. Where's the real empirical evidence?
Right.
You know. But
I'm just saying he's throwing around philosophical terms, metaphysical terms like proof and it's, you know, proven or whatever you want to call it. He needs to give some type of epistemology to back that up. Science is not an epistemology. Sorry, it isn't.
Right. Good point.
It's purely inductive.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Very good point. That's destructive to his entire system. His entire worldview and way of looking at things. That's great.
Right. He needs God to even justify that is a fact.
Right. Exactly.
Isn't that ironic?
He's just contradicting himself. I mean, he's even borrowing our worldview just to even argue his position.
Yes,
you know, because his position is unsustainable. You can't argue from a position like his. You can't. He needs to borrow our position in order to even argue using the laws of logic or using uniformity in the universe itself. His whole position's ruined.
Yep. Facts assume some type of tautology, and that only is in the realm of absolute standards. You need some type of absolute standard or transcendent standard to justify that. So we got that out of the way. So no, EME, you don't get facts in science. Science does not deal with facts or proof. So there you go. Even Steve McRae has even made that clear. So if you want to say, well, that's just some presuppositional garbage. No, listen to Steve McRae himself. And just one real quick. I mean, to me, that was kind of weaselly what you did, telling me to go to hell just because I speak the truth. So I thought that was a weasel move by EME. That's weasel.
Yeah, well, you know what? Truth is hate to those that hate the truth. So
exactly.
Over many generations. It is a fact that humans are a subset of apes in the same way we're a subset of primates, and in the same way we're a subset of mammals. And this is evidenced by remarkable morphological similarities between humans and great apes, or nearly identical genetic similarity and synteny. The fossil record ends.
Yeah, we already destroyed all that. We covered all that stuff.
One quick question though: what is synteny? What does that have? Can you explain that to me real quick, like in layman's terms?
Actually, the fact that he brought up Synteny is pretty good because Biologos and Dr. Venema, they look at Synteny in their arguments in proving common ancestry, because it's, in layman's terms, I guess it's used to describe the distribution pattern of genes on chromosomes. It comes down to pattern. Okay, what it is that they pretty much a pattern in genes, but it's the distribution of them on specific chromosomes. But technically, they assume, okay, the evolutionist ESE here assumes that only universal common descent can explain these patterns and the distribution of them as well. And that's why I've gone over and over again as to why, no, creation in the design model predicts the same nested pattern. But we look to a variety of genomic related predictions to distinguish between the models, right? Because these DNA level patterns and hierarchies, they're agnostic. We both predict it. Now let's come up with a way to distinguish between the models. And guess what? We're using genetics, and we're winning.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you for explaining that.
No problem.
Consistent temporal and geographic distribution, the number of chromosomes shared between humans and great apes, to the conservation of endogenous retroviral sequences, to the discovery of vestigial genes. It is a fact that both micro and macroevolution events have been observed. It is a fact that macroevolution have been indirectly demonstrated by the in vitro fertilization of different animal species and the grafting of different plant species. It is a fact that transitional forms do exist. It is a fact that atavisms and vestiges only appear in lineages whose basal ancestor possessed the character in question, and that their distribution within the species fits the nested hierarchy of life with remarkable consistency.
Have you guys heard these arguments from atavisms from evolutionists? Have you encountered that?
Yep, it's in our book. Again, you can go there and read through it and show how it's yeah, we've answered everything. They just don't want to look at the work. They don't want to go to the books. They don't want to see the link. They scream all the time, links, links, give me links. Okay, get them yourself. They exist right there. Type in Control F, type in the word for, and grab your link. I'm not going to hold your hand. No.
They literally want us to do all the work for them. Because even now, what does he say? You know, to the nested hierarchical patterns in DNA, he says in the chat, well, you can't distinguish between design and descent patterns objectively. Okay, let me use really small words. Maybe he'll get it this time since I've said it 1,000 times. We predict the same patterns, okay, in DNA, in morphology, in similarities and differences together. That's why we've made genetic predictions that are already being tested. Some are coming true. And with further genomic research, we will see if more of the predictions come true. And then we can, you know, once and for all, really see what is related and what's not. Already we know there's a barrier. But I've gone over a number of the predictions that have been made. You know, the extent of information in some of these technical papers is beyond the scope of this broadcast. And I've sent him over a 50-page paper by Dr. Nathaniel Jensen, very specific, very technical. Some of the stuff I have to look up, and I'm like, you know, this is, and I've talked to Dr. Jensen many times through messaging on Facebook and stuff, just to clarify some of this stuff. And guess what? ESE can do the same stuff. This is very technical predictions. I've said we've made predictions on relative DNA patterns between kinds, so we can distinguish between the two models, predictions about rates of mutation within kinds, predictions on DNA function. Function is key between kinds, predictions on absolute mitochondrial DNA differences. Like, this is how we can objectively look at the patterns in DNA and conclude what is true, universal common ancestry or limited ancestry. Function, for example, we already have the biochemical evidence there. Over 80% of the genome is actively transcribed. It's not idle, it's active. Let's do further tests. Let's do some gene knockout tests. Let's see just how functional you know, the genome is. Let's find out some more mutation rates. Let's look at the mutation rates of other species that haven't been looked at or sequenced. You know, there's only a certain amount of species genomic sequences in the database currently. But as of now, with the ones we have, we're making accurate predictions and retrodictions. So speciation rates too, as we've talked about earlier, the predictions are already coming true, and that's a good sign for the future. But the evolutionists can't make these types of predictions. They can only make the observation and say, oh, these hierarchies are consistent with common design or common ancestry. Yes, so are they with common design. Now let's get down to a genomic level, because it's the traits and the genes that are inherited. So if he can't get it, that's okay. We've already demolished him in these last two broadcasts. Watch my 3-hour debate with him, because he uses really all the same arguments. He's just used them now with slides, you know, pretty slides. So this is good. We've covered them. But, you know, what else can you tell a guy who, I guess, doesn't really want to listen or possibly doesn't understand it? That's what I understand. That's what I believe.
You guys have broader horizons to go down. I mean, you got to engage with. So yeah, we're gonna get past that now.
Okay.
It is a fact that every living species on Earth has relative species either extant or extinct. It is a fact that every organism since Darwin fits within the tree of life. And finally, It is a fact that the distribution of diagnostic traits shared between any two or more groups of fundamentally similar organisms is best explained by common descent as opposed to common design.
Yeah, 1 minute.
All right. Common descent, common descent, common descent, common descent. So here we end with a quote from Charles Darwin. He says, quote, "There is grandeur in this view of life. From so simple a beginning, endless forms most beautiful and most wonderful have been and are being evolved."
So that concludes that. So
we should use the Darwin quotes in return, and
yeah.
Darwin actually completely debunked himself multiple times.
Oh, if we went into quotes, yeah, he wouldn't stand a chance.
Yeah, you don't want to go down quote avenue, buddy.
Well, that's what I mean. We could go for hours. That's why you give them the sources. You give them the book, our book. You give them the technical paper to see the scope of a simple broadcast. Do you want me to pull up Dr. Jensen's 52-page technical paper and just read it line by line, for you? You want me to pull up Replacing Darwin, which has all these predictions, and read it line by line? The evolutionists aren't looking for answers, but they're losing every debate. That's why it's damage control every time in the comment section.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, he brought up, some ERVs. So if you wanted to talk on that for a minute, that would be a good one. And then we can show the slides where he was showing this is a fact. Darwin finches were macroevolution. I want to touch on that for a minute as well. So ERVs and then Darwin finches. I'm good.
We also have Richard Sternberg's video clip too, if you guys wanted to show that.
Perfect.
So, yeah, I guess you guys want to talk, or you want me to show that video?
Well, I mean, we've talked about endogenous retroviruses in great detail in debates and discussions in live videos on how they're more consistent with the creation model. Therefore, yeah, like you said, in this particular instance, let's just let Richard Sternberg, who's a genius, explain to these evolutionists why endogenous retroviruses cannot honestly be used and employed to demonstrate universal common ancestry. Not what we now know about the function of the genome, what we know about all these functional DNA elements, ALUs, ERVs, whatever it is. It's all part of the design that leads to adaptation. So yeah, let's play that video.
If Dr. Meyer keeps on adding his intelligent design argument there, he's retreated out of science once again. It's supernatural. It's not a testable hypothesis because he will not allow it to be falsified.
It is testable, and it's testable in the same way all historical scientific theories are testable. You ought to know about the...
Yeah, just something real quick. I mean, probably Stephen Meyer might be the top 3 echelon of debaters I've ever seen. So you're not going to pass it over him. Okay, let's say it like he's the beast mode. He's beast mode. And then you have Sternberg too. They're both beast mode. So these evolutionists got completely schlacked. It was so bad. I actually remember this debate. It was a great one.
Oh, this was a must-watch debate. Please, everyone in the chat, if you haven't seen it, watch it. It's fun.
I love Stephen Meyer, man. He's awesome. And also Sternberg too.
Method of historical scientific reasoning. I show in the book, Signature in the Cell, that the case for intelligent design is based on the same method of scientific reasoning that was used by Darwin and by Lyell. That method is a method called the method of multiple competing hypotheses, standard in geology, where I was also trained. And it is and the hypothesis of intelligent design is testable by comparing its explanatory power over and against its competing hypotheses, and it's also testable by comparing the predictive success of the theory. The theory, for example, has predicted that the so-called non-coding regions of the genome, which were said to be junk by the Darwinists when it was first discovered, and was affirmed to be junk by Michael Shermer as recently in his 2008 book. Intelligent design advocates have been predicting since the early 90s that the non-coding regions of the genome would be shown to be importantly functional. Those predictions have been confirmed. In fact, overall, the non-coding regions of the genome
Excuse me, that's incorrect.
That is correct.
Incorrect.
No,
I
that
have
is
it right in
correct.
front of me here.
I don't think you want to argue about junk DNA with Richard Sternberg at my site. He's writing a book about
I'm
it.
happy to.
Yeah.
Okay. I did a whole bunch of research on
we
this.
don't have time for that, I'm afraid. We're going to have to
Well,
go
I
to
have a rebuttal
questions.
if
Anyway,
anyone wants to hear it.
intelligent design has made a prediction about junk DNA not being junk that makes it scientific. We think the evidence has come in overwhelmingly.
Just one quick fact for the audience, the chat, is Sternberg got wrongfully terminated from his job at the Smithsonian because he had intelligent design views. Why would evolutionists be such bigots if evolution was true? Something to think about.
In fact, it's not we, it's coming in the scientific literature every week that shows that the junk is not junk, it's importantly functional.
Okay, let me answer that one before it gets passed over. It turns out, yes, the early naive Darwinists before this discovery of nucleotide sequencing thought everything was functional, and so they were shocked to discover in the 1960s with the very beginning of DNA sequencing and actually from the very primitive techniques they had like gel chromatography, that there was a lot more DNA than seemed to be needed. And the basic thing is that there's a whole series of things in the DNA that clearly cannot be functional, that are junk. We don't know how much is junk, but enough of it is that it's clearly non-functional. I'll bring up one that was thrown at Dr. Meyer in Oklahoma a few weeks ago and apparently didn't know how to answer, and that's endogenous retroviruses. These are retroviruses that insert their DNA back in, or their DNA back into your cells when they infect you or when they infected your distant ancestor. They lock that in, and then your cells carry this. It's sort of like a scar tissue. You carry this dead virus DNA generation after generation after generation, no longer capable of producing those viruses, is evidence that your distant ancestors were once infected and it no longer has a function. And everybody who works on that agrees there's no possible functionality to this. It's completely non-coding. Pseudogenes are also once function genes that have lost their coding. Maybe some portion of what we used to think was non-functional turns out to be functional, but most of it apparently is non-functional and non-coding. You can see that very clearly if you look at things like how much DNA it takes to make an organism. Frogs and salamanders, ferns and salamanders, which are, most of us can see, a little bit simpler than us, have 100 times more DNA than we do. There's even an amoeba, which is called Protopolychaeus debium, which has 200 times the DNA of a human, just to make an amoeba, okay? Clearly not much of that is in use to make something as simple as an amoeba. An onion, one species of onion has 5 times the DNA that humans have, another species has 20 times. These are 2 species in the same genus Allium. Clearly, that can't all be functional DNA if you have that much variation within a genus and that much variation from the simplest amoeba all the way to things like frogs and salamanders. So there's a lot of DNA that's not coded for, and I would say that majority, by far, the people who actually work on this would say that most DNA is still non-coding.
Dr. Prothero, you're a geologist. We have a genomics expert to my right who'd like to comment.
I also had a degree in biology, and I've done a lot of work on this.
This is a competition between who's got more of a degree. You'll have a final comment, and we're going to go to questions.
Okay, I want to respond on the retroviral sequences topic. He's absolutely right. There are hundreds of thousands of copies of these virus-like sequences in our chromosomes of mammals and fishes and even the yeast cell. Now, what's interesting is that he's wrong on a number of points. Here's the first point. One of the first class of sequences to be expressed shortly after the first or 2-cell embryo, that is from the zygote, including our zygotes, mouse zygote, to the 2-cell stage embryo, first class of sequences are the endogenous retroviruses. And you know, it's determined in 2004 is that if you knock those sequences out, you block their expression, you stop embryogenesis at the 4-cell stage. Actually, it's cited in a paper that Jim Shapiro and I, one of the papers published in 2005, where we dealt with this topic, this whole issue of why this so-called junk DNA is functional. Here's another example. What holds the placenta together is a class of proteins, and they form tethers. And the proteins that are coded are specified by retroviral-like sequences. It's different in the mouse than the ones in the human. If you look now, there are these switches that flip gene sequences on and off. They're called promoters. You can think of them as molecular toggle switches. A recent analysis of the number of these genetic switches in our genome contributed by these endogenous retroviruses. So many of them, they just have to be garbage. 181,000, roughly. So, and you look at the literature, what they're doing now, and this is, the ENCODE project was published in 2007, a series of papers where they looked at not just the sequences, but the expression of sequences, how they're copied in RNA. And what they found, to their surprise, is that most of the expression is taking place in this so-called non-coding DNA. And you can find papers in Nature and Science, genome research, genome biology. Thousands of them are out there now. Go to PubMed.org again, just type in junk DNA and see what you pull up. Don't take my word for it. But what you find is that when they investigate these classes of sequences, as numerous as they are, they're finding a whole series of functions. Pseudogenes, for example, so-called pseudogenes, their expression regulates, yes, they don't code for proteins, that's true. Do they look like defunct copies of other genes? Yeah, they do. But you have two papers back-to-back in Nature, and what they demonstrated is that, well, those so-called non-functional RNAs, the transcripts, are regulating other genes. And I'll be happy to provide you with the PDFs and with the references for those papers.
Okay. I have a comprehensive list on page 407 of my book.
That was pretty awesome. Actually, there's one other video I'd like for you guys to see if you wouldn't mind. I don't know if you ever seen it.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I'd like to see what you guys would think, because maybe there's some new things that maybe you guys haven't seen about this argument. Or maybe you have, but maybe like this is something you've already seen and touched upon, but maybe you haven't. So this, I think, is still good for the chat. So I think this is a good educational and learning tool for the chat. So I'm going to put it on, and we'll go from there. Whoops, I'm on the, let's see here, hold on. This playlist doesn't exist. Here we go. Yeah, Sternberg and them are pretty awesome. So here it is. Genesis Apologetics.
Another problem.
This is a great channel. I recommend people to get in to subscribe to it.
Widely used.
This is Genesis Apologetics, yeah.
Promote the idea that humans and chimps shared a common ancestor millions of years ago. But have you considered how they came up with this estimate? One of the things that not many people know about this study is that large sections of DNA from both the human and the chimp genome were left out when making this comparison. Let's see how Minute Earth, a secular training site that holds to an evolutionary perspective, describes it.
When researchers sat down to compare the chimp and human genomes, those single-letter differences were easy to tally, but the big mismatch sections weren't. For example, if a genetic paragraph, thousands of letters long, appears twice in a human scroll, but only once in its chimp counterpart, should that second human copy count as thousands of changes, or just one? And what about identical paragraphs that appear in both genomes, but in different places, or in reverse order, or broken up into pieces? Rather than monkey around with these difficult questions, the researchers simply excluded all the large mismatch sections, a whopping 1.3 billion letters in all, and performed a letter-by-letter comparison on the remaining 2.4 billion, which turned out to be 98.77% identical. So, yes, we share 99% of our DNA with chimps if we ignore 18% of their genome and 25% of ours.
So did you guys know that?
Yeah, that one's in my video, actually, my main one. It's also in the phylogeny challenge one as well, because they've that's ignored data. Yeah, I knew that one. That's in a couple of my videos. I love that one.
Yeah, so it's only 99% if it's if they dismiss 20% of ours and this other part too. So yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, exactly. See what I mean about skewing the data? They hide information from the kids. They hide information from the public, because if we knew it, that's why I said that drops their genetic data material for matching lower than mice and pigs and house cats. And remember what they said, if we don't genetically match primates more, evolution is falsified. So they hide that data. They have to. So
yeah.
Wow.
But
ignoring 18.
Was there more?
Yeah, this is a couple minutes long.
Okay, go ahead.
% of the chimp genome and 25% of the human genome. That's a lot to ignore. In fact, this represents hundreds of millions in each side of the comparison. Could the sections they left out be responsible for coding most of the obvious differences we see between humans and chimps? The video explains.
And there's another problem. Just as a small tweak in a sentence can alter its meaning entirely, or not at all, a few mutations in DNA sometimes produce big changes in a creature's looks or behavior, whereas other times, lots of mutations make very little difference. So just counting up the number of genetic changes doesn't really tell us that much about how similar or different two creatures are.
It certainly makes sense that just counting up the number of genetic changes doesn't really tell us that much about how similar or different two creatures are. Indeed, human DNA and gene-level comparisons are frequently made to other mammals, such as mice, cows, and even dogs with high levels of overlap. And we are obviously quite different from these animals. The fact is, the human and chimp genomes code for two completely different creatures. While both are mammals based on scientific criteria, God made man in his image and gave him a...
Wait a minute, we're eukaryotes. Oh, we forgot that. Uh-oh.
Oh, we've been debunked. We give up.
Yeah, we're overthrown.
They went back under the lung of the ladder. We can't win.
soul that is eternal. Chimps, which are soulless tree-dwelling animals, and humans, which are eternal souls wrapped in bodies that have vastly different capabilities than all animals, because we were created in God's image and charged to be caretakers over creation, including chimps. Being made in the image of God and charged with taking care over God's creation would mean that humans would have several distinctions from chimps. Let's take a look at just some of them. First, humans are the only living thing on the planet that has a conscience and a sense of morality. Our conscience lets us know when we failed or when we might fail to abide by either governmental laws or God's laws. Primates know nothing of laws. They live only by instincts. Next, humans can speak. For example, the English language contains over 1 million words, and we can speak all of them. Plus, we can even learn or invent totally different languages. Apes cannot speak any of them. They do not even have a speech program installed in their brains. Speaking of brains, ours are 400% larger than chimps. We're also much smarter, having an average IQ of 100 when chimps can't even take the test.
Hey,
Our
Praise,
brain
can you
cells DNA
pause it real
carries
quick? I
very
just want to say something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously ESE, he can't, I mean, he's totally defeated. He can't debunk any of this, but he'll leave a couple random comments in the chat, right? He'll mention one little thing that he thinks he can touch on out of, the 1,000 things we bring up. He can't touch 99.9% of the lines of evidence we're using. But he said, and I'm so sick of this argument, he said evolution predicted function in junk DNA way back in the 70s. You guys are a bit late with that prediction. See, the thing is, evolutionists, they got their fingers in their ears. So no matter a lot of the times how many times you explain to them and correct them, they'll still repeat the same arguments. Now, evolutionists did predict that, or did expect some of the non-coding areas that they referred to as junk as functional. A little bit here, a little bit there, but they expected most of it to be evolutionary leftovers, like literally no junk, just genomic fossils, right? Leftovers from the evolutionary process. Just some they would, you could get a quote here and there. Well, they'll say they expect a little bit. Here's the thing. Intelligent design advocates, creationists, for example, now, we're predicting that the majority of it is functional. And I've had debates with scientists who know this stuff, PhDs, for example, and I've asked the question, non-coding and coding DNA, everything combined, what is the maximum amount of functionality? No games, no word semantics, the max you can have. And the scientists, the ones that are educated in this, a lot more educated than ESE, because you can really, really see that ESE's genetic related knowledge is lacking. That's why you can't respond to any of this. But they have said no more than 15%. And many no more than 10%. But they'll just say 15% just to be safe. Okay? Well, guess what? We've always predicted that the vast majority is functional, non-coding and coding, over 90%. Obviously, we're going to see some, mistakes, a little bit of junk DNA due to genetic entropy, of course, but the majority of it's going to be functional. And what do we see? Well, ENCODE found that at least 80% of the non-coding DNA is transcribed into RNA. It's biochemical, but it suggests function. That's what we've made predictions on gene knockout tests, that let's knock out that gene, block the expression like they've done with the ERVs, and we're going to see the effects that could only be explained by a functional gene sequence. And very little of these experiments in regards to knockouts have been performed on mammals. So let's get the evolutionists to make predictions on DNA as well in regards to function. And the thing is, like, what they're finding is that it's not just a little a piece of sequence here, sequence there, like the evolutionist said before, might be functional, but the majority is junk. No, these non-coding areas of our DNA, they literally function much like a computer. It's like they're working behind the scenes. The coding part of the DNA, it's just a small part of the, what's going on in the DNA. We understand so little of the DNA language, and, it's all involved, this non-coding area. There's regulatory functions, embryonic development, the timings of protein manufacture. I mean, I can go on and on and on. And this is the vast, vast majority. And that also makes genetic entropy that much more destructive. So I don't really care if ESE wants to keep using the same argument, because I've got tons of clips in all my debates with experts in this that are evolutionists who have admitted maximum amount of functionality can't be any more than 15%. So if ESE keeps repeating this, he's going to have to admit that he must expect that the majority of the genome is functional as well, because no, it's opposite predictions coming from both sides. And there's so many quotes. I mean, literally Richard Dawkins in 2009, he literally said, "It is a remarkable fact that the greater part, everything, non-coding, coding, everything, no games, no word semantics, of the genome might as well not be there for all the difference it makes." Well, what do we know now? As I've gone over, the non-coding areas, they're involved in very important regulatory functions, embryonic development, so on and so forth. So therefore, he's wrong. And he realized this because way after 2009, when with the accumulating papers suggesting function, ENCODE results, for example, he admitted, "I know there are some creationists who have jumped on it because they think it is awkward for Darwinism. Quite the contrary, of course. It is exactly what a Darwinist would hope for, to find usefulness in a living world." Okay, these evolutionists have always assumed the majority is evolutionary leftovers, and they still do. They still do. They say maximum 15%. We're saying over 80, probably 90. Those are specific predictions. ESE needs to, he needs to evolve a little, poor guy. But I really wanted to put that to bed. He'll keep repeating the argument, I guarantee. But since this is just an all-inclusive destruction of ESE and just in evolution in general, we've touched on everything. It's been amazing. I would suggest maybe we can combine both and even upload that in the next couple of days as like just the full video, part 1 and 2 combined. So unless you guys have something to say on that, junk DNA has been overturned, and these evolutionists, they're backtracking, saying we only predicted it. We did predict it. No, totally wrong.
Absolutely. ENCODE, come on, who hasn't heard of ENCODE, the project ENCODE? That's so easily to look. It was in 2000, for freaking sakes.
And he just said again, 50%. No. Scientists, and you guys know CRISPR and Scientist Sam and all these guys, Dr. Fellow, non-coding and coding, and very specific. What is the maximum function, whether it's regulatory functions or coding for a protein, whatever. Like, they seem to think that if it's just coding for a protein, that's the only type of function. No, there's construction tools, okay? The developmental process, the step-by-step process on a molecular level regarding the developmental process. What's the DNA doing? What's in there, silent, hidden, ready to do something? What about the staging of the stagings, getting ready of proteins for construction of molecular machines, the switches? The non-coding DNA is performing functional roles, important roles for the organism, just like the coding DNA. They work together. It's kind of like, what's a good analogy? Like a play. You go see the Lion King play. You got the actors on the play doing their thing. You got one dressed as Scar, one dressed as Simba. That's like your protein coding genes. And behind the scenes, you've got, people taking care of the lights. You've got directors, producers. I mean, these are like your non-coding genes. I don't know why they can't see this. And these scientists, these guys who understand the field a lot more than ESE, because he's just been demolished over and over again, non-coding and coding, very specific question. What's the maximum, both combined amount of function that the genome can have? And they admit 10 to 15%. CRISPR, he's a pretty formidable debater. I've debated him 4 times. Very smart guy. Scientist Sam, he works in epigenetics. These guys are way more knowledgeable than the guys we've been debating lately. But they don't deal with us anymore because they can't even debunk us. So they've given up. But they've said 15% maximum. You can read papers. That's it. It has to be. They can't have it anymore, or else these mutations that are supposedly neutral and they're absorbed by our genome and they have no effect, well, that would just demolish it. Because if the majority of our genome is functional, they're nearly neutral, they're deleterious, they're degrading us a lot faster than evolution needs. Evolution's impossible in regards to that. So yeah, that's the last time I'm going to correct him. If he wants to remain stupid, then he can. If he wants to remain ignorant, then he can. He literally is willingly ignorant. In the Greek, that means dumb on purpose. He can be dumb on purpose. I don't care.
Idiotes.
Non-coding, coding, they admit 15%, 10% probably max. No, our prediction is well over 80%, probably 90%. Very specific DNA predictions. ESE loses. He loses really bad. This has totally exposed him. And I love that he's in the comment section, because we've also debunked and addressed his comments too. His comments are done. His presentation's done. He's got nothing left. He probably will go back to the drawing board, but he's got nothing. So
yeah, he's gonna end up where it's same as here though. That's so it's so
Matt,
futile. It's futile.
But Matt, how come you don't think he gets it about the non-coding and coding?
I'm not really sure. I mean, he said he spend time researching it. Well, let's just, he doesn't. He can literally go to our books and type it in. But really all he needs to do is just think about it. He goes, well, let's see if they've answered this question. And if it's true, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to believe it? Or am I just going to go, well, what? I have more questions. It's like, how many do you need to get answered before you realize, okay, maybe there's something to this? But they never do that. You notice that? Very odd.
Well, they don't. And, he's obviously believes that evolutionists mean 15% of the coding, which is ridiculous. I don't know where he gets that from, but maybe we'll put some clips together of, some of these scientists. Maybe we'll get the clips together where I've asked, Sam. Actually, you know what? That's why whenever I debate these guys that are, to be honest with you, kind of scientific illiterate, like T-Jump, for example, he kept using the same arguments. Oh, we've always predicted function. We never predicted junk. And I literally asked him, well, how much of the genome, non-coding and coding, do you think or predict is functional? He said, oh, I don't have an answer. It doesn't matter to me. That is literally the point, because if you believe the genome is only 15% functional max, coding and non-coding, that means the other 85% is junk. What is so hard to understand about that?
Right. And you'll throw the consensus card at you too. Well, that's not what the consensus says. You guys are just like in the 3%ers or something, you know. So you'll get that thrown at you as well.
Yeah, you'll love that. I love that one because I go, well, okay, so the consensus holds it. Then you should be a Christian because over 50% of Earth are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyways, the video you're doing is awesome. What we keep playing that, finish it up. We've gone through, I mean, ESE's video like crazy. I mean, it's we might as well just retire, like we said. So
we have
I gotta
other
get up
things
early
to do and counter now and to tackle bigger things.
Oh, we're gonna go on to bigger fish. Yeah. He's done for. Yeah, you know what? It's been a blast today. You guys finish off. I'm gonna listen to the rest from bed. I gotta get some sleep. Got to be up early tomorrow. But we've covered everything. And if anybody has any other questions that are like creationist, email Praise or me or Raw Matt, and we'll give you guys some answers. You know, because maybe they don't understand something or want more clarification. We're here to help. That's what we're here to do. We're here to increase the faith of our brothers, fellow brothers and sisters in Christ.
Amen to that.
Awesome. Yeah, man. I mean, I only had a couple really things I wanted to touch on real quick myself. Real quick, you know that they mentioned this before Praise, right? How they say ERVs are a good sign because they're shared between humans and chimps, and ERVs stand for endogenous retroviruses. So what are the odds that a virus infected an ape and then affected a human, and yet we share them in the same places? Well, check this out. There's 98,000 ERVs, and only 14 of them are actually shared in the same location.
Wow.
That's 0.000014%. That means that 99.999986% are not the same. Hardly proof of favor of evolution, especially since the fact that ERVs are even found now to be passed on by, and they move around. So they actually change their position. So it's when you get tested too. And ERVs have function, so they're not viral, because no virus ends up being beneficial to the human, being human to anything, right? You're not going to get a virus and be like, oh, good, I didn't get sick. It's great. I grew something. I got better. So ERVs actually have multiple beneficial functions that are required for life nowadays. So that's another good one. And so, you know, I guess we can move on from that. I just wanted to say, I'll screen share real quick. Check this one out. You'll like this. I will show you guys what happened with the Darwin finches and beak size. You'll be shocked. So I will just start going. I have these, which were found. So in 1998, the NAS guidebook that published in public schools, they conveniently failed to quote a 1987 article. And why they did this is because if they read the original data about the finches, right here, it says it is noteworthy. Here, I'll enlarge it for people. It is noteworthy that the NAS version of the Grant's finch beak story is according to Intelligent Design. They basically found that the beak size returned to normal after the flood season. It's not evolution. Actually, right over here, it says the full story was involved the fact that the drought season of year 1997 was followed by heavy El Nino rains and flood of 1982 through 83. As a result, the drought included a selection trend of 1997 to 82 was completely reversed. The average finch beak size promptly returned to normal, meaning and no net evolutionary gain change occurred, meaning or much less long term. The straight line represents the extrapolation and the predictions of the way. So basically, you've all heard of the Darwin's finches and how their beaks evolved based on what was going on for the new bird. This original data was hidden because they didn't change their beaks at all. They adapted it based on the season. So if it got really, it was like saying when it gets really cold, I grow longer hair on my head because it keeps me warmer. And then when summer comes along, my hair falls out, or I lose more hair because it keeps me cooler. That's exactly what the finch beaks did. And yet they still exclude that information, and they tell the public, nope, that's proof of evolution. You can see the beak size changing. So that shoots them down, and they hid that information from the public, and I just exposed it. And they have I have the links in the book, but as a matter of fact, here are some of the, you can even see on the book and the page number where it's exposed. So that's always good. I like to show people that.
Yeah, great information. Like they always say the beak thing. But still, they're not changing like what Nephilim Free would say. Like they're not changing their anatomy though. Like they're into something that's like you're not changing a beak into like a third eyeball or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. You would need something. You need something new. You need something happening that's changing these things, really changing them. Not like, oh man, look at the spots on the hyena are bigger now. No, that freaking hyena needs to be going into an aquatic animal somewhere. You know what I mean? But that's just how we know that is impossible, because all of these things that they say are related on these different branches have no relation whatsoever. You can take a sea lion and see if it has anything to do with the dog family or the lion family, and you'll quickly realize they do not. But according to them, they do. So.
Yeah, and I understand too is they always extrapolate these things. Like let's say they'll say, well, like dogs and some other type of species out there that it happens really fast. Like it's like 20,000 years this happens. But they don't stay consistent. They'll just say, oh yeah, that's evolution. But then when you have like with these other things that take with apes and other things, they're hundreds of thousands of years and millions of years, they'll say. And that's how evolution works, with little slight modifications. But we don't see that though with like 75% of the animal species out there. We don't see these long things. They're quick.
Yeah, exactly. But yet that's why they go to the fossil record, because you can tell any story you want in a fossil record. It's very easy to just make a story up. So
yeah,
you can say you line bones up.
Just make it up. I mean, it's basically they're just making junk up as they go. Just because they're trying to fit it in their narrative. Just fit it in there, shoehorn it in there.
Yeah. Let me. I gave you a video to play real quick. I thought you'd find it funny. Do that real quick, and then here I'm going to send you the link one more time, and then play that, screen share that real quick, and then I will get on the last two things I want to close up with, and then we can move on to another subject or close this up.
Yeah,
I sent you on whatever this is, SteamYard.
Oh, I want to let people know that we're going to do Build Lulo tomorrow.
Yes. Yes, we are. You guys are going to love this.
The discovery of DNA and protein synthesis has completely disproven the theory. It is not possible that these remarkable biochemical entities could be originated by evolutionary processes. So forget everything I said. A new theory must be started immediately. Often a cold shudder has run through me, and I have asked myself whether I may have not devoted myself to a fantasy, to suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus to different distances, for admitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection, seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest possible degree. Did the theropod dinosaurs grow wings out of those tiny arms, flap them real hard, and fly high into the sky? The notion is ridiculous. This another challenge to the theory that I can think of. I remember well the time when the thought of the eye made me cold all over, but I have got over this stage of the complaint, and now small trifling particulars of structure often make me feel uncomfortable. The sight of a feather in a peacock's tail, whenever I gaze at it, makes me sick. The fact that no hominids exist today, and there are no primates evolving larger brains, intelligence, and consciousness is a detriment to the notion that we evolved from an ape. All I have to say about the theory is, never mind. Why did I make up that stupid theory in the first place? To all of you people who believe it out there, I am deeply sorry. Now, back to the grave. But first a little fun.
That was so good.
Yeah.
Be sure and check out Stephen Blume's books on Amazon.com.
Yeah, that was pretty good, man. A good share.
That was funny. I'd never seen that channel or that guy or anything before. I saw it today. So it was funny that Emotionally Stunted had the Darwin quotes. So I pulled out. I was like, oh, hey, I just saw some Darwin quotes today. So, yeah, man. Also on his thing, he showed a picture of camels, for example, right? So I don't think that's hardly a good case at all, because we see llamas today, and we see llamas came from camels. It wasn't the other way around. So we see loss of genetic information, and we see loss of physical traits as well, because you can visibly look at a llama and see that it doesn't even have a hump for water. So loss of anatomical features again, no gain. So again, we go in the past, and what do we see in the fossil record? Gigantic camels, not even living in a desert, but up in this Siberian tundra. So we know camels were far larger, far stronger, and in the past, and were able to survive in much different climates, unlike today, where they're specifically isolated to almost deserts. And we see stasis again, and loss, not gain. So, again, how can we tell they're related? No problem. You can graft them. They can produce offspring. That's a good way to tell if something's a kind. So, how about whale transitions to fossils in a horse? I love this one because, again, it's kind of destroying them. It states that the fact that every living species on Earth has a relative of a species that is either extinct or non-extinct. Well, exactly. Because the main families were created. That's why all 55 animal or mammal families still exist. No, there's no new ones that have formed. They never created a new mammal family. Everything grows out of that single branch. They just come from there. I like to ask people, how is homosexuality good for evolution? Why do animal species have this trait? How come humans do this? That doesn't benefit any. It's an extinction to your seed. Homosexuality ends your lineage. It's over. What good does evolution have with homosexuality? It doesn't have any benefit. To evolve homosexuality is to destroy your lineage. There is nothing about evolution that would make homosexuality. It is destructive to evolution. Adventism, he brought that up earlier. Well, having a cat, let's say, start to grow fangs like a saber-toothed cat one day because of adventism, that wouldn't be a strike against creationism at all, because it still is kept within the realm of the original created genes and phenotypes. That's allowed, right? That's they shall bring forth after their kind. They're still felines. But extra toes on a guinea pig, or no claws on a dog, or color blindness in humans, this isn't proof of evolution, but yet all those fall with adventism. So it's not evolution in any way that they try to portray it. These are regulations that are harmful mutations and nothing more. For them to use that as proof of evolution is like saying that all original humans were blind at one time in the past, or all dogs couldn't dig because they didn't have claws, or all guinea pigs had twice as wide feet for balancing while they're walking on their hamster wheel. See what I mean? Insanity. So that's over with. How about the original jungle fowl? You know what? When they say, oh, there's little chickens that are born today that have some little bit of teeth in them. Yeah, well, guess what? Guess where all chickens come from? It's called the red jungle fowl. And they had teeth. So when teeth show up in modern day chickens, it only points to the heirloom chicken that also had teeth in their mouth. And you can go and research you can Google at any time, jungle fowl, Gallus gallus. And guess what? They're still alive today, and they're inhabiting northeastern India, southern China, Sumatra, and Java. It's the most probable event of where all chickens came from. And the oldest jungle fowl today is dated thousands of years old, not even close to millions of years old. So again, stasis. Don't even know what to go on with next. He states that traits are shared between any group groups is best explained with common descent. I say no, it's not. Wings on a fish, wings on an insect show design, not evolution, because evolution says that they evolved flight over multiple groups of organisms all on their own. So like fish evolved to fly, insects evolved to fly, mammals evolved to fly, birds evolved to fly. All these things independently learn to fly. Well, why didn't we learn to fly? I mean, flying sounds pretty awesome to me, but yet all these things individually learn to fly. That's why they came up with convergent evolution. And it's the worst rescue device that exists if you ever investigate what convergent evolution is. But let's look at the stasis, or like stating things like a fact, like without question, showing that, you know, bees are bees and butterflies are butterflies, you know, and then we get to monkeys and man. I don't really think I need to go into that again.
Moon keys.
What's that?
Moon keys.
Yeah, moon keys.
Ooh, like the moon keys. That's why I like it.
Yeah.
Lunar. It's like lunar ticks. That's part of the book. People know what I'm probably talking about, but it's part of the gospel. Lunar ticks has to do with insanity and Satan, because the moon's connected to Satan, so people can look that up.
Right. Man. And then, how about this one? He said, I want genetic information to show that things have boundaries. We went over that a little bit yesterday, but again, Canadian microbiologist named Paul Herber, he coined the term DNA barcodes, and he figured out a way to identify species by analyzing the COI gene. And he said specifically that mitochondrial snippets are able to distinguish between each species, and he's able to see these direct lines. And here is the genetic evidence posted. Let me find the chat for live. There it is. So you can go to physics.org and you can see that he clearly was able to see different species had clear genetic boundaries, so we can tell what is a kind. And guess what? They all arose at exactly the same time, right after Noah's flood. Boom. Genetic evidence from secular science, exactly what they asked for and exactly what they just discovered. And the reason why it says 90% and not all life is because they actually included things in there like the polar bear, which showed that it was evolved later. It speciated from another bear and became the polar bear because it got landlocked in the Arctic regions and it got stranded there. And so it adapted to the cold by that way. So that's why not 100% were included. That's why it says 90%, just so you know, or the audience knows.
Very good. So we probably can wrap this up now. We've been on for like an hour and something now.
Yeah, we covered a lot, man.
I mean, to be honest, though, I think you guys have bigger frontiers to cover now. I mean, you have other things, bigger fish to fry, and to address bigger evolutionists like Dawkins. There's some other ones out there that are big namers that need to be exposed.
Yeah, Dawkins will be a good one. That'll be a fun one too, because everybody thinks he's the man. That dude, he's horrible. You know what his best example for evolution was? Fish. He put fish in an aquarium and said that they evolved camouflage. He doesn't even, oh my gosh, it was embarrassing. So I can't wait to embarrass him on that one. That'll be fun.
Yeah. So let me give you some list here. Biggest evolutionists. I mean, we can go down the line and see what you guys, who you want to tackle here. So, PZ Myers, have you done him yet?
No, that'll be a good one.
Bill Nye. How the hell is Bill Nye?
Bill Nye we destroyed. That video did good. People loved it.
Stephen Jay Gould, I think you did him.
Good one.
Haldane. I thought Haldane was one of the ones against evolution.
Yeah, I don't know that name.
Ernest Mayer. Not sure who that guy is. Heckel. Ooh, there's a good one. Huxley. Niles Eldridge. Eugenie Scott. Oh, there's a good one.
I'm writing these down, by the way.
Yeah. Eugenie Scott, I would put her with a freaking arrow through it on a dartboard.
Okay, that'll be one of the first ones then.
Yes, that'd be a biggie. And PZ Myers, of course. I mean, why is it like there's no prestigious? I don't see any prestigious evolutionists. There's nothing to draw upon with the evolution camp. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
If you go down the history of creationists, we have a whole freaking you know, gosh, a whole bunch of them.
Oh yeah, well, most people are against us, but that's nothing new. We're used to that. They don't want to read between the lines. They'll just look. They'll just like browse through the scientific study and say, "Look, it all reads evolution." They can't read between the lines. It's amazing. They can look at the mitochondrial Eve data, and they'll see that the mitochondrial genome showing that her mitochondria data showed that she was 300 generations ago, and that she also lined up with a mutation rate that showed she lived 6,500 years ago. And they'll just erase that from their memory, and then they'll go straight to the phylogenetic version, which is just assumption based. It's amazing what they can do in their mind. I love it. It's like debating your shadow. You know, it's pointless.
Yeah. So if you take away, so Bill Ludlow was one of your top, you know, heralded evolutionists. He's gone. What happens if you take away now Aaron Ra? Where is the evolutionist camp going? There's nothing there. They have nothing that's substantial at all. That's growing. That is going to, you know, stay grounded. There's nothing there. So I think that speaks enough in itself.
Yeah, and Aaron Ra is very unhealthy. He's like the next in line probably to go, man. I mean, he doesn't give a damn about himself. That's apparent from looking at him. So
yeah, I mean, he looks like one of those guys that, you know, drinks probably about 10 freaking beers a night, you know, or something. With some marijuana stogies, all that stuff. Like you're right, but I guess, you know, what's funny is I think there's actually Christian evolutionists that might be bigger game for you guys. I'm gonna give you some names.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Francis Collins. You should, yeah, that would be a good one because like he claims to be a man of God and stuff.
Okay.
And the one we just hold on, there's from Brown University. What's his name? Ken Miller.
Oh, I've heard that name. Yeah, that one's famous. Do these guys debate though? Will they actually sit there?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So those are two. They claim to be, you know, Christians, whatever, with theistic evolutionists. And you already did IP, right?
Yeah, but he doesn't want to talk on science, so it's kind of hard. That's nearly impossible. He had never. Matter of fact, he doesn't even want to talk on really anything. Bill Ludlow gave him a thing on health, and I was listening to him debate. I think the vegan gains, and he pronounced senescence wrong, so he doesn't even know like the basic stuff. If you can't pronounce senescence, which any gerontologist or cell biologist in the field of health would know, he doesn't know the subject at all. So I don't know. I would just kill him. It would just be awful. I would want competition. Give me competition. Give me something hard. I want to be able to answer people's questions. He's just going to deny what I say. I don't want to. I saw Standing for Truth debate these guys, and they're just like, no, that's not true. I'm not debating a denialist. I want to debate somebody that's like, well, here's this. Like, what can you show me? Can you prove that mitochondrial Eve is young? Yes, I can. You know what I mean? Is there a way to distinguish between what a species is genetically? Yes, here's the data. You know, we're kind of getting all that now. You know, 10 years ago, it'd been kind of hard to probably defend creationism, but now it's not. Now we've got what we need. So in 10 years, it'll be over. We'll have destroyed them. Everybody and everything.
There's actually a website that is a freaking main hub for evolution, like one of the biggest ever. It's Origins. I think it's not True Origins. It's hold on. If you could address their site specifically, that would be a big one.
Oh no, I know the one on in the book that I'm that's almost done. It's
Talk Origins, yeah.
Yeah, Talk Origins. I've debunked their work a lot. I find their stuff funny because, matter of fact, that's where I got content for making my flood video on the worldwide flood. I went to their channel and I went, what do they have against the flood? So I went down the list and I used all of their best arguments against them. That's what I did. So then I added it to my flood book, which I will post to everybody right here because why not, right? If they like the flood or if they don't like the flood, at least they'll have great evidence for them. And I made it like a picture book. So it's super entertaining for people to read. They can see the evidence of the flood and then they can go and click on the links and see it. And I visually took photos directly out of books that I own and uploaded them so they can see it right out of the science textbook. Boom. Anyway, I kind of got off my got a little sidetracked talking about the flood.
Yeah, but no, that's good stuff to talk about. So I guess maybe another one's Daniel Mays, but he's of course probably avoiding you guys.
Ooh, look at that one. Someone said they want to watch me debate the carnivore diet. Oh man, that's easy. I have some of the earliest data on glycation that showed that it's actually protein and fats that actually cause the most glycation of the body, which means it ages it faster than anything else. So all the people that are eating ketogenic diets are destroying themselves really, really fast internally. So yeah, I would love for somebody to debate me on health. I will eat them alive.
Oh my gosh, that would be brutal. That'd be actually brutal.
I want to debate. I even want to debate other vegans. I want to eat them alive too. They're an arrogant bunch, man. I'll tell you.
You know who you need to debate then? I'm gonna try to get this to happen with James. Is Turd Knocker that was just on a couple days ago. You know his name because I think you were in there, weren't you? Or
yeah, Vegan Games is his name.
Oh, son, that'd be a good one.
Yeah. He wouldn't debate me, but I'll do it. Tell him.
Yeah, that guy was one of the most annoying, dishonorable, useless. It's just terrible to listen to atheists I've ever had the displeasure of listening to.
Oh man, Durian Ryder. Have you seen my video on Durian Ryder? I actually think I took it down. It was so violent. It was so mean. But that guy, Durian Ryder, talked a lot of trash. That's kind of what he does. He's kind of like a clickbait guy. And I found that I was on his channel. He made content against me. And it was on 30bananasaday.com. Oh my gosh. I blew up. I said, I better never see you come to the United States. I'll come to your health fest and beat you to death. That still stands.
Isn't that the same dude that was with IP, right? Is that the same dude?
What's that?
Is that the same dude that was with IP, right?
I think so. No. Durian Ryder's a different guy. You're talking about Vegan Gains. That guy just ignores me.
Oh, I thought that was his real name was Durian Ryder. I mean, what's like, like
right. Oh my gosh, these guys, man, these are some crazy people. They they hurt a lot of people with their information. Let me tell you, man. They think that they know their answer and they're out there selling their books as much as they can, and then their health fails them. Like, check this out. To this day, Durian Ryder has to inject testosterone because he doesn't produce his own anymore. He has to inject B12 because his body doesn't make it through intrinsic factor anymore. He takes multivitamins, including iron. He doesn't absorb anything. Then he failed at the raw vegan diet, so he moved to veganism, and then he failed on that and made raw till 4. And then raw till 4 freely his girlfriend kind of took because he couldn't even keep that going. I mean, he eats sugar. He pours sugar, like just straight sugar. Oh yeah, he has Sprite for breakfast. That's a superfood, by the way. Sprite. Remember that. So good out there. Who needs teeth, right? I don't know. The guy is just absolutely insane. And you know what? He has a huge following because he's willing to say anything online. So that's what it takes nowadays. You want to be popular, say anything.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Just as long as provocative, And
Right.
Of course, they think it's to make fun of Christianity, attack it. Of course, that's provocative to them, and they think that's really fun and that's really entertaining, and that's the entertainment value they get out of it. So, that's what you get.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we'll wrap it up. I mean, we can do another live one. Me and you are going live tomorrow on your channel, so we'll cover some more stuff then.
Oh, you want to do? Okay, so we're gonna do Bill Ludlow, my channel, right?
Yeah, 9:30 your time or Eastern Standard.
Yeah. Sounds
cool.
Good. You don't want to air? You don't want to air that on SFT or?
Yeah, I'm down for either way, anywhere you want to do it, man. Here it is, or your channel.
Well, I'm just saying, instead of downloading and bringing it over or whatever, unless you don't want to. I mean, I can either one. To me, it don't matter.
No, let's do it here. He can remove it if it's too hateful.
Yeah, but to me, the truth is, to me, where's the line drawn where you just tell the truth? That's all I'm going to be doing is telling the truth. None of the stuff I'm going to be bringing up is making stuff up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's what irritates them. People don't like truth. They get mad at it.
Yep, the truth is offensive. But, oh well. We're going to call it tonight.
All right. Sounds good, man.
So I'm going to say good night and God bless. If you have anything else to say, Matt, then you can, before we get off here.
Yeah, I don't know. Nothing. I mean, I think we covered everything in that video, and if they want links, I mean, they're everywhere. I mean, I have.
It is everywhere. Still emotionally still asking for citations.
Oh yeah, yeah. Standing for truth has got them.
Sorry, EME. You're basically like a little minnow now. You're gone now. I mean, you're basically useless now. You were used for educational purposes, and we'll just leave it there. And good night, and God bless everyone.